I was once married, but I found that when I underwent a separation and divorce, one of the benefits of it was that I had a lot more time to myself. I was able to spend a lot more time with my thoughts. I was able to constructively analyze problems that I was facing in my life, and I was able to listen to podcasts. I was able to talk to people and try and spot the issues that were present in my personality. But if I didn't have the time, if I was involved in a chaotic life where I was involved in the cut and thrust, now, if I'm able to take the time to analyze my life, to look at things through an objective lens, it's almost as though your life is a movie and you are looking at the movie. And sometimes in a horror movie, you'll see the main character, you'll see one of the characters entering a dark room and you'll say, that's such a bad idea. No one is coming to save you, and that's frightening. So I think you have a responsibility if you want to make the world a better place to go out there and to try to help other people.
Real men, raw stories, radical perspectives. This is the voice of authentic masculinity. This is Manhood Speaks.
Ravi Raja, welcome to Manhood Speaks.
Morning, Kanu. Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
It's a pleasure to be here.
it's a pleasure to have you, my brother. All right, let's dive straight into it.
Yeah, let's go.
Tell me, Ravi, what is your current role or focus in life?
My current role of focus is, well, I've constructed a hierarchy or pyramid, and I think that the thing that ought to be given first priority in this pyramid is certainly health, because without good physical health, it's difficult to accomplish anything else. It's difficult to focus on your work. So physical health is certainly the first priority. I think mental health and wellness would be the second priority. These two work together to make a positive individual that can face situations and challenges which arise in life. So from there, I would say, and I would also say that the mental component includes having a sound spiritual base. If indeed you're inclined to a particular spiritual orientation.
All right, like I like that. Let's speak a bit about the mental aspect because
Sure.
I'm not sure how many men actually focus, or I should say, how many persons. But seeing that this is about manhood and it's about men, I'm not certain about how many men pay attention to their mental health. Why do you think that that is such an important thing to focus on?
I think to operate within any system, you have to understand firstly how the system is constructed and what are the challenges that you will face. It's like playing a game. If you don't understand the rules of the game, it's going to be very difficult for you to succeed because you don't have a measured approach. Yeah. So for me, I think having good mental health is absolutely critical. So you want to have a plan, you want to have an objective as to how you're going to go about achieving certain things. One of the best things that a person can do is to have the opportunity to think and reason and plan and strategize. If you look at podcasts, you look at videos from persons like Arnold Schwarzenegger and Jay Cutler, persons who have achieved great feats in their particular field of fitness and powerlifting. You will understand that these are persons who had a particular plan, a structured approach in how they approach the achievement of that goal. So they would go to the gym every at a particular time. They would have particular muscle groups that they target every day. They would eat at particular times. So they were able to formulate a plan, and based on their discipline and commitment to the plan, they were able to achieve that goal. And I believe it's this way for any objective that you have in life. Yeah. Um, a lot of people, a lot of men don't take the time to understand the system, as I said at the start. So you have to understand that the system is designed. It's the economic system. It puts a lot of pressure on you. A rising
Hmm.
cost of living. Every household now requires two incomes. yes, to survive and to meet the mountain expenses that society will put in your way, whether it's school books, these different things. And you have to understand that it's a very stressful environment. For instance, your home is supposed to be a sanctuary. You work hard on the outside, you come home at the end of the day, you may have a significant other. But it's difficult sometimes not to bring problems into your own personal space. So you have to understand your partner, you have to understand what mental stress is, how to alleviate mental stress in another person who your peace of mind may also depend on. It's really fact specific. You really have to sit down and analyze the reality of your existence and try to work a plan to see how you can best achieve your objectives. But obviously, the bottom line is that plan is absolutely critical.
Lovely. How do you, or what strategies do you implement in your life to deal with mental stress?
Yeah. So for me, something that's dear to me is sports. I I enjoy table tennis. I enjoy cricket. These different outlets to relieve stress. So I try to engage in those particular disciplines. I also enjoy doing working with other persons. So one of the things that I do is I tutor adult literacy. And well, as you know, there's a program that we've done in the prisons before in 2023 that we are looking to do once more with the blessing of the current commissioner of prisons. So giving to others and is really important to me, as well as engaging in sporting disciplines. And I like to achieve an objective, so I'm very competitive. If I'm engaged in a particular sporting discipline, I want to win. So the journey, the training that you have to undergo, the physical training, the mental training, the strategy and tactics, getting lost in those aspects of preparation provide me with particular joy because you see the progress as you go along. And this goes back to having a structured approach. I also have a daughter who plays table tennis for the national team, so I enjoy building her and supporting her. You know, that's also critical. That also goes hand in hand with my peace of mind and well-being because at the end of the day we're here for a finite period of time. We will What legacy are we going to leave? So it's very important for me, the legacy that I leave, the way that I speak to people, that all forms part of it.
I love that. I want to touch back a bit. You mentioned about in these economic times, there's a need for two incomes, especially if you have a partner. However, we often see on social media, I don't know if you came across it, where there's a push generally that the woman should be in the home and the man is the provider. He must go out and he is to provide all of the needs that this home needs. But you are saying that in these economic times, there's a need for two incomes. Help me to understand your perspective when it comes to your understanding of the need for two incomes and what is said on social media.
A loaded question with so many sub aspects, but
I know.
I will tell you this. So traditionally, because that would be traditional view is that men were the providers, and sometime around the Second World War, well, based on my research, when men were out at war, it was a very man intensive war. This wasn't a It was fought on land. Yeah. So a lot of men went off to war around the time of the Second World War. And what it meant was that women entered the working population in the United States. And what you find is that trends that happen in the United States tend to follow and disseminate itself worldwide. So you had the working woman entering the working population for the first time, and you found that in many cases they were able to match the efficiency displayed by men. And of course, this led to greater advocacy of women's rights, greater freedoms and liberations for women, as opposed to the role women enjoyed in a more traditional sense pre World War II. Now, this created a shift, a paradigm shift, and it was a bit difficult for when men returned from the war. It was a different social environment at that time, whereas you had a more submissive woman that was willing to pander to the whims of the man as the traditionally stronger party. Yes, stronger in terms of economics included and strength. Have found men having to adjust to this new reality, and I think it's something that we've struggled with tremendously as men, particularly that generation between the 1960s and the current time. Because remember, the traditional role of women is something that dated back centuries.
Yeah.
So when you're dealing with a centuries old tradition, it's difficult to realize and accept that change. Because 1945 to the present is still a very short period of time compared to
Very
world
short.
history.
Yeah.
And the idea of women being the submissive party is something that, or the secondary party, or the weaker sex, is not something that I propagated. If you look at biblical times, they go back to the book of Genesis, they'll tell you that Eve was made from Adam to provide him with companionship. That was the function. So, why is this relevant to the point of two income households? Well, we're no longer in a traditional setting where you have the man being the absolute provider. Women are now capable and determined to contribute. So when you have now, that's the first aspect of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. The second aspect to it is you have wants and needs. People want to live comfortably. One of the problems with social media, in my respectful view, and I could be wrong, is that it's sometimes you people now have access to what they consider an ideal standard of living. So one of the things that I totally dislike about social media is that you could you look at people's lives and what they post, and you say, "Wow, I wish I could have that."
Yeah.
I'm gonna speak a little more colloquially in a minute, but I'll speak the let me wrap the proper thing for now. So I'm looking at your life and I'm thinking, wow, this person has these amazing things. And then you look at your life and it makes you feel a sense of inadequacy.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you start questioning your life, which is in a objectively pretty good position. And that could be extremely dangerous. But what it also does is it means that because I now have this ideal standard of living in mind, I need to have greater income, revenue, or wealth to achieve that lifestyle. And it's very difficult in this current time, depending on your skill or education, to have to achieve that lifestyle with one income. Now you might say, well, Ravi, look, you have different tiers of professions. Isn't it going to be different for a doctor or an engineer as opposed to the man who's working in Subway?
Yeah.
And I would say to you this: people have a way that they always want more. Yeah. So let us put it: the man who is working at Subway may want what the lifestyle that an engineer that he sees an engineer or a social media influencer, he may want that lifestyle. Yeah, but the engineer or doctor may want an even higher lifestyle. People find a way of developing new needs and wants. It's almost as if you're not satisfied. Society encourages you not to be satisfied with what you have. And the thing about the two income household, the third tier to your question is the implications of it. And the implications are simply this: you cannot, if you are in a relationship where your significant other is working and you are working, you may have expectations that when you come home, she performs the traditional roles of a woman. And her take on it, and if you think about it, she may be very well justified in saying this to you is, well, Kanu, I've been working all day as well.
Yeah.
I've been working hard. Why should I come home and do this? Why should it not be a joint effort? Now, if I was a housewife in the 1920s, I could understand those demands. My job is to take care of the household, but because of the movement, the upward, the tremendous, the meteoric rise in women's rights since World War II, the tables have certainly turned, and So there are many reasons behind it, yeah?
Yeah.
Many reasons behind why a two income. And realistically, Kanu, the thing about this is, if you look at the rising cost of living now, let's okay. So there's a lot of factors behind this. I don't want to go on and on about this one point. The last example I'll give is this: let's say that you have a child with someone that you love,
Yeah.
and you don't have the extended family around to assist you. You have to find substitutes, and you may have to go to a daycare. You may not want to go to any daycare because this is your offspring. This is your legacy. You want to invest tremendous amount of value into this, into my legacy, into my child, my offspring.
Yeah.
You may want to pay for a private institution because you want to get your child the best possible start.
Best. Yeah.
What goes in is what comes out. What you sow is what you reap. That's first principles. So you have to pay money. And the cost of a private daycare now is anywhere between 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000, depending on the standard that you want to for your child.
Yeah.
No, that is almost an entire income. So how can you know? And you have other expenses. You have to, you want to eat healthy. You want to eat. Okay, I don't want to live off of doubles. Doubles is our local delicacy here. There's really fried flour
Yeah.
and
And
fried
oil.
chana.
Yeah.
Correct. That's not something that you want to be eating consistently. You want to have a good source of nutrition because we go back to the objective of physical health.
Yes.
A Subway salad now is $55. I want to that's what I paid anyway for one yesterday. So even the salads that you were getting before, the nutritious foods that you were getting before, they are becoming quite expensive. If I'm a working man and I decide to eat two salads a day to maintain my health in addition to running cardio around the Queens Park Savannah and going to the gym, right? That is almost $110 in food every day.
Oh.
$110 in food multiplied by five. You're talking about upwards of 500 a week, and that's 2,000 a month.
Yeah.
So the cost of living is becoming exponentially higher. You even in terms of the housing market, a property in look, you know buying a
Yeah.
property, the biggest financial investment you'll make. So it's the system is almost designed to put financial strain upon persons and men included, and you add that strain in terms of to the so there's a financial strain, an economic strain, and there's a non-economic strain, which is the inherent difficulties that arise in man-woman relations.
Yeah.
And it's I have that's why I said to you in an email that I sent you a while ago, and we were discussing the prisons program, that the I don't think I sent it to you, but one of the persons I was seeking feedback from, I was telling them the system is designed for the failure of relationships.
Hmm. That's
I,
interesting.
and I know that's a big movement away from the idea of
That's all right.
why there's a need for two income households, but the concepts are extremely closely and intimately connected, in my respectful view.
I heard you mention legacy twice. You spoke about legacy when it comes to your daughter and legacy as a man. What does legacy look like to you?
You know, I think legacy, and it's to me, in its most fundamental way, its most fundamental definition is what you leave behind. What have you, when you're, I'll tell you a brief story quickly. One
Sure.
of the most sobering experiences I had, the most life shattering experiences I had, was my father was having to see my father's body wrapped in a sheet at the Port of Spain General Hospital.
Oh.
Because in that moment, he had been recovering, and I came and I saw him wrapped in a sheet. And in that moment, there was a total break in my world because this was a person who had lived for years. I used to watch football with my dad. We used to laugh, we used to talk, we used to share jokes, and now all of a sudden, in one moment, he was no longer there. And that was the most shattering reality I have ever had to face. And it was as though after he died and I returned home, I was looking around and I was saying, this is a person who existed and did so many great things, and now he's not here. The world will never know he existed. He's going to become a memory in a few months' time. And so that shaped my outcome, and it really shaped my current view as to why legacy is so important. At the end of the day, my daughter is that's my blood. You know the saying, blood is thicker than water.
Yeah.
If I could help her achieve something and build her into a strong young woman, in my respectful view, that would be one of the greatest achievements I could have in my life. For the idea of her taking forward good values and virtues in addition to the lessons that she learns in sports, and making a positive influence, a positive impact on society herself. Now, you will never read that Ravi Raja was responsible for that. That's not a headline that's going to be written.
Yeah.
But sometimes legacy doesn't just involve publishing a paper that eons ahead of you or eons to come will read your work. Sometimes it involves putting down work and passing on your legacy to others in a way that no one would understand. But make
Oh.
no mistake, every man wants to leave a legacy. In my respectful view, what that legacy is, I suppose, differs between men. Brian Lara will his records will stand after Brian Lara leaves the earth or Dwight York leaves the earth. Their records of what they have accomplished as national heroes in Trinidad and Tobago will stand. Eric Williams is always remembered as the man who won independence from our colonial masters. That's the legacy that they leave. You have a personal legacy you can leave, or you can leave a legacy in other ways. But to me, it's absolutely critical.
I love that. You mentioned your father. What are the qualities of manhood you learned from your father?
My father was a well. There are two aspects to a person. The the qualities that that person lets you see. It's kind of like in a relationship, and people put forward their best foot, so that's what you see.
Yeah.
And then there's the reality that is apparent when you really analyze the person. So my father was a man like anybody else, but he was raised very much in the Catholic Church. His home parish was St. Patrick's in Newtown, and I remember hearing stories about Daddy. Almost, he had like a cult-like status. I don't want to say cult-like status in a Jim Jones sense. I mean to say he was very popular amongst the local church population.
That's it. That's important to
I
clarify.
have to clarify that very much. Yeah. So he was a person who would he would play Santa Claus for poor children in the community. He would get donations, and as a bank manager, I know he was a person who would the bank would send back when we had National Commercial Bank before the merger with First Citizens. He was a manager who the bank would send to various trouble branches to turn around. And I always remember my father being a people's person. I remember going with him to the bank on a Saturday morning, and you would always order KFC, which is a bad thing because it eventually led to diabetes. But I do remember that he'd put on a movie and we'd watch it. And people loved my dad. And when he took us to clients, he was a people's person. His first inclination was, how can I serve
Wow.
others? So I would think, I wouldn't think actually, because it's me we talking about, I should know. So I picked up those ideas of charity and giving to others from my dad. Service is very important. But of course, you also have to look objectively at the person. And you ask me, what did I learn? So what I learned was not only down to what he showed me, but what I was able to objectively work out about his weaknesses. Part of the problem about being a person who serves, now, it's like this. They say the meek shall inherit the earth. That is said in the Bible.
Right.
But what they don't tell you in the Bible, or they do hint at it without saying it expressly, is that meek persons get trampled on a lot. You can be used because remember, your good nature, you can be taken advantage of. This, to put it in its simplest form.
Yeah.
So what I learned from my dad as well is how to be a little more tactful and choose my battles. So for instance, I work in the legal profession. There isn't a great need to do. You can be a good human being and you can be understanding when persons come to you with their various issues. Yeah. But the extent to which you help somebody in the legal profession who's had a more privileged upbringing, or is should be able to, by virtue of their experience, find their way past certain problems. I wouldn't give as much charity to a person in that position as I would possibly to a person who, to go back to our prisons program again,
Yeah.
may not have had the benefit of a great upbringing, and the information that was fed into that person as a child, and they have now ended up in jail. You know, you you can understand and have more sympathy towards that particular situation. I also teach alter. I can understand adult literacy is also something that I am very keen on, because when you educate people, you remove them out of poverty. And you can have different things, poverty of economic circumstances, poverty of mind. And I can tell you that the level of care I would give to those persons who are coming out and fighting to improve themselves, because they want it. They want it. And if you think about it, when you submit yourself to literacy classes as an adult, it is a situation where you are acknowledging a weakness. And this is something that people feel ashamed about. So they come out and they give themselves and they put themselves out there for betterment. And I would give more charity. I would give my time to a cause like that. And I would give more time and attention to a cause like that. So the way I would deal with people, I can be a people's person, but I would more show that side of myself to persons who, in my respectful view, need it more.
Yeah.
And I think where we put our time, the causes that we put our time into as human beings, is something that we also need to consider before we go out into the world. And it goes back to having a plan for the world. You see, the last thing I'll say, it comes back to this. You could choose to, as a man, run down the most beautiful woman. I want to go in the club. I want to go in the club, boy, Kanu, and I want to meet this real nice girl, boy, and I know longer looking at her. Back. I don't want to say it, but people speak in Trinidad, the bumper sexy,
Yeah.
she popping. You can put your time into a course like that, and that's fine. But what is the long term benefit from if you're looking for an ideal partner and a wife, that's a different thing, eh? But if you're looking for just fun, casual fun,
Moment.
you
Yeah.
might want to assess the value that you get out of a venture like that, as opposed to the value that you get out of a venture like putting your time into persons who need it now. It all really depends on how you have been socialized. Because if I grew up with my father womanizing, that would be what I know. That would be the information and values that were fed into me. So I could, in a situation, that is how I might be. That is how I might turn out. I might turn out a mirror image of him. So, like, you need to do some objective thought as a man, because you may not come from the best circumstances, but you don't need to follow the examples that were set to you. So, for instance, there are people who come out of difficult areas like Lavantil and they are a success story, because they sit down and they see their reality and they say, I don't want to be a part. I don't want this to be my future. I am going to rise out of this situation. This is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to educate myself. I'm going to do courses in Roytech. Every course that I get, I'm going to do and educate myself. So it really comes down, as I said before, to planning your life and where you want to put your time and what's important to you. And also understanding the system that you are in, and understanding your position in life, and whether you are going to become a product of that system or whether you are going to rise out of that system, assuming that system is a negative one.
Powerful words there. Tell me about your upbringing. You mentioned socialization. Tell me about your childhood.
Well, I think for me, that's very funny because, so as you can see, Kanu, I am of East Indian descent.
Yeah.
Now, why is this relevant? Because you know that Port of Spain does not have the city, Port of Spain in Trinidad, well, that's where I grew up, does not have a significant East Indian population or East Indian influence. In fact, politically, it's belonged traditionally to non-Indian party. Let's be very frank about these things. Yes. So
Yeah.
I am an East Indian who grew up in an Afrocentric part of Trinidad. So that would have I have an interesting socialization in that hey, I have these East Indian roots, but I have grown up in a more creolized area of Trinidad.
Yeah.
So that's very important because for my socialization, because I would not it's difficult for me then I would not engage in traditional Indian practices. I don't consider myself a traditional Indian fellow because of how I was socialized. So for instance, if Sizzler was performing in the savannah, I definitely would go to that concert. I like
Uh,
dance, all different types of musics as
yeah.
opposed to what you might find most Indian people listening to. As well, how that has influenced my upbringing is that I have an appreciation of both sides because later on I was able to socialize in a more East Indian environment. So I have a decent understanding, in my respectful view, of people because of course our population is comprised mostly of East Indian and African.
Yeah.
So having that socialization in both cultural groupings has given me a better understanding of how to deal with people. And that's the first thing. But that also happened because I was willing to learn. You know? So for instance, when I go to South, a lot of people they will fish and hunt, in the forested areas that you tend to find more in the Southland, for
Right.
instance. So it's a different lifestyle, a different way of thinking. And then of course I also grew up in the town. And town people think a little bit differently from country people. There's some South people who you will meet say, I don't understand your town people at all.
That is true.
Yes, correct. So the thing about it is I I grew up in a particular situation where I was able to appreciate both my roots and the people around me. And you also have a lot of other minority groups in Port of Spain, like Chinese. My first girlfriend was Chinese. So I was exposed to that cultural group. And when I say Chinese, I'm not talking about Trinidadian Chinese. I'm talking about first generation parents from Hong Kong Chinese.
Wow.
So the cultural exposure that I was able to get was certainly different from what a lot of other people might encounter. I basically grew up. My best friend was also Chinese, so I grew up in a Chinese household. I would see the way that they live, the way that they think, and so to give all of this some context, as opposed to being a ramble. One of the things that I appreciated about the Chinese group is their Chinese association
Yeah.
and how they help each other. Yeah? So you would find sometimes 8 to 10 Chinese people in one small apartment. What would usually happen in those situations is that they would bring their family. Well, I shouldn't say they bring their family. Their family from China would come to Trinidad. And whilst they establish themselves, this is the family that has recently come to Trinidad. Whilst that they establish themselves, they would stay in these cramped conditions. And they would work in a Chinese restaurant. Now, their persons who would have already been here. Their family that are in Trinidad would have a Chinese restaurant in operation. So these people that recently come down, work in the Chinese restaurant, understand how business operates in Trinidad, learn the trade, and they support each other. Then, after some time, maybe 6 months to a year, the people who have just entered Trinidad will now, with the help of the Chinese community in Trinidad and Tobago, open their own restaurant. Every night, these people, I don't say these people, but the way that these people operate was particularly instructive and inspirational to me. These people in this cramped apartment would have dinner together every night. And of particular interest, they don't necessarily eat the food that they would serve to local persons in Chinese restaurants. So they'd have their jasmine rice and their pak choy, and perhaps the only thing they would eat that you would find in local restaurants is the fried chicken. But
Okay.
jasmine rice, pak choy, black mushroom. So they're eating healthy, they're having a healthy meal together as a family, and they're supporting each other. They're supporting the progression of their own cultural group, which to me was absolutely amazing because it encompassed a level of teamwork that you don't usually see amongst Trinidadians in general.
Mm.
You might see it sporadically if people are friends, but by virtue of belonging to that group, it would give them the impetus to help persons in their group. And on a Sunday, after they've worked 5 days per week, Monday to Saturday, on a Sunday, they would all get together and have dim sum. So you'd find Chinese restaurants on a Sunday. A lot of them you'd notice are, you would see Chinese people going to these different restaurants. But the restaurants are not open to the public. And it is, in very many cases, their practice to prepare dim sum and have these family gatherings on a Sunday. And when you think about why they do these things, I mean, it's pretty clear to see the logic. They place a tremendous emphasis on family and community. And very many times you would hear people talking about the crab and barrel mentality. You know, sorry to say, but you don't find that support. When I say the crab and barrel mentality, human beings have a tendency to not support each other. The crab and barrel mentality refers to, well, as far as I can see, people pull down each other. They don't support each other. If I am rising within my family, I might encounter jealousy
Yeah.
within my family, and they're telling me things that bring me down. So being around the different cultural groups is certainly something that taught me a lot. You look at the Syrian Lebanese community as well. I had friends who we would call Syrian, really the Syrian Lebanese community. You call them. You look at the way that they live. You look at the way that they handle finances, the way that they spend money. You tend to find they tend to be better money managers, from my experience anyway. You may know personally the Syrian Lebanese community were different, but the way that they handle finances, the way that they manage their wealth, it is, I always tell people, I say, you don't get rich by spending money wildly, and there's a difference, mind you, between spending money wildly and investing properly.
True.
So you look at the way that this community handles their finances, you can understand why, to a large extent, they maintain a position towards the top of the economic hierarchy. Yes, and of course, um, they are also a very close knit community.
Yeah.
Yes, and of course, I won't go too much into what that being a close knit community entails, but certainly the management of finances is something you can look at with them as well. So, growing up in Port of Spain, and the particular environment that I did, it's certainly, if you're very observant, it will teach you a lot of positive life lessons about how to live. Yeah. I could say as well that in terms of the community, my community, I grew up in a very, when I was younger, Woodbrook was different. There were a lot of residents here, but it's become a commercialized space where I live. But what that meant is that I grew up a lot around a lot of businesses. And I was able to speak to a lot of businessmen to understand how they think. And it's so funny that the persons you surround yourself with play a great influence on your level of thinking. So I started speaking to people and liming with people, hanging out with people who their objective in life was to make money by legitimate means, of course.
Yeah.
And they would tell you how they go about doing that, and how I've made that very clear, because you have some people in the community who make income through illegitimate means.
Yes.
But you see a lot of different things, and there are people. Woodbrook is an area that there's a high level of prostitution as well. So you would see the different sides of the economic spectrum. On the avenue where I live, you have people who have successful businesses, commercial enterprises, and then you have people on Murray Street who make their income in a different way. And the first, I remember there was a friend of mine. There's a playground in close proximity to the area that these women of the nights, and sometimes men of the nights, ply their trade. And I told my friend I'm taking my child to that playground. She's like, "How could you take your child there? That's a place where prostitutes lie." Well, I'll tell you something. A prostitute, the prostitutes that ply their trade, they are really no different from the average person. If you meet those women in any other area, you can have the most intelligent, not maybe not the most, but you can have a conversation with them, a very intelligent conversation with them. They're persons like any others, but they will tell you that, look, I've come from a past of sexual abuse, and the money that I can make here, $200 to $400 in one job, 5 jobs per night, that's $2,000 a night, tax-free income. And you begin to understand that when you listen to their stories about where they come from and how they grew up and maybe the sexual abuse they went through, you appreciate all people.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even so that's it. And to go back to the point about me growing up around a predominantly African community, what I guess I meant to say was that when you live with people and you share their sorrows and their joys, I mean, you don't see things like division. What you see is people.
Yeah.
And that is not something, and I didn't want to be controversial on your podcast, which is why I skirted around the issue when I first started discussing it. Division is something that's prevalent in society and human nature. People will always find reasons to divide themselves.
Correct.
Yeah. You have the Hutus and the Tutsis in Rwanda.
Rwanda.
They
Yeah.
they are the same. There's no difference between a Hutu and a Tutsi. They are Rwandan citizens, but these persons have found a way to divide themselves on tribal lines. And there was you know this
Yeah.
movie Hotel Rwanda. That's a very popular movie. But
It's just over 31 years that happened back in 1994. Yeah.
yeah,
Wow.
I'm telling you.
So that's an interesting background that you have there. Support. Based on that experience you had in your childhood and the environment that you grew up, why do you think it is important for men to support other men?
Well, this goes back to the earlier question we're discussing on the change in women's rights. And this has shifted the economic landscape and the social landscape of our society. And change can be a very difficult thing. Yes, it's a very difficult thing in any context. Now imagine change in such a fundamental scenario as the rules between a man and a woman. Man and woman relations go back centuries. Man and women have had different dynamics and a particular way of doing things for eons. Yes, and for this change to happen as dramatically as it has happened since 1945, and even with the civil rights movements in the United States, and characters of immense value, such as Rosa Parks, just to name a few, it's change, as I said, is going to be very difficult for men to deal with. And even in this, and it's going to be more intense at this time in our society, because you have persons who were raised by mothers, and the mothers would have had a particular role. And now, you're going out into society to look for a partner, and you're realizing that, hey, a lot of these women out here are not filling the traditional role that I was taught a woman should fill as a child. This also goes back as well to traditional roles of men. So you'd have noticed in our media that there's a shift in the way that men are portrayed in Hollywood.
Yeah.
So if you've watched characters like Rambo, Dirty Harry, if you've watched Rocky, you would see what the traditional stereotype of a man is. Is a person who's strong, who's tough. The Western movies that my father used to watch, all very, the men tend to be very self-contained, tough, determined, very masculine, rugged almost.
Yeah.
And you're seeing now that men are being portrayed more and more in Hollywood as time has passed, as wearing dresses and being more feminine, being more in touch with their feelings. So clearly, we cannot deny that there's a shift taking place. And when you have a shift that goes to the very essence of what you are expected to be as a person, such a thing must be, such a thing is seismic. Now, if you understand the gravity of the change from that statement, it follows that the one of the ways to deal with change is to have support. But you're not going to be able to get support from somebody who doesn't understand what you are going through. So this is why, in my respect for you, it comes back to the idea that men need to support each other, and it's not in a toxic masculine, a toxic masculine way that you're going to get together with other men and bar talk women or say negative things about them. Although that might enter the conversation, but you're not looking at the negative things that women do. You're looking at the negative things that people who are women do, because people have negative values. It's not women. It's not about coming down on women. So you need that level of support, and I would suggest, okay, it's like this. You and I playing football together, Kanu,
Yeah.
and we're trying to make the national team. But there's something about your game that you can't see, something that needs to be improved. When you take that half an hour after after practice session and you sit down and you say, Ravi boy, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. The more people that you have to give you feedback is the more likely you will be to spot the problem. And life moves at such a chaotic pace now that it's difficult to stop and check what is actually happening and perform a constructive or detailed analysis of the problem you are facing to fix it. So let me give you an example. Since let me play straight for you, right? I was once married, but I found that when I underwent a separation and divorce, one of the benefits of it was that I had a lot more time to myself. I was able to spend a lot more time with my thoughts. Yeah. I was able to constructively analyze problems that I was facing in my life. And I was able to listen to podcasts, I was able to talk to people and try and spot the issues that that were present in my personality. But if I didn't have the time, if I was involved in a chaotic life where I was involved in the cut and thrust, now this was partially during the COVID-19 pandemic, which, to be fair, a lot of people had downtime. So maybe it's, but the principle remains the same, Kanu. If I'm able to take the time to analyze my life, to look at things through an objective lens, it's almost as though your life is a movie and you are looking at the movie. And sometimes in a horror movie, you'll see the main character, you'll see one of the characters entering a dark room and you'll say, that's such a bad idea. Don't go there, man. You're going to get killed. They always kill off the minority character first. Don't go into that room. That's how Hollywood does it. So you are watching the screen and you're making a constructive analysis of what is going on using data and your experiences in life. But how many times do we do that in our own lives? How many times do we sit down and look at a problem and say, boy, the last two relationships I was in, it had money issues. Let's just do an example. Maybe I need to take some time and boost my financial status. But then you also, are these people, the criticisms that these people are giving to me, is it valid criticism? Do I really have a problem? Let me look at other areas of my life and see what's happening. And I could tell you something, that period in my life when I was able to spend time with my thoughts coincided with a lot of successes that came afterwards. Because I was able to sow plans. Even my daughter at the time, she was a young table tennis player, and I looked at her and I said, I really love this little girl. I want this little girl to achieve the best. I'm going to back this girl. But how to do it? Which coaches to take her to? Which coaches would would invest time genuinely as opposed to being motivated by financial gain? Which coaches historically have the best record? Which coaches have a reputation for developing players with a backhand, with a forehand? Maybe I need to take it to different coaches to get different things. And so when I sat down in my apartment and I thought about many things, I was able to come up with a lot of different plans. In fact, the prisons program that we did was born from my time in solitude.
Wow.
And if you notice, to say one last thing about it, um, when you band together with persons who have ideas for support, the quality of information and data that you are getting to make your own analysis improves. We use my example, but also there are other persons I would have spoken to who had different views on masculinity and had different views on problems in life. And when you band together and you really talk about things, you get renewed vigor to approach your problem. So you may have you may be feeling particularly hopeless about a situation, and then you've spoken to other persons. But again, it's important to keep wise counsel. There's a saying: "Show me the friends that you keep, and I'll tell you the kind of person that you are." If you're lying with persons who want to run down women and sexualize women, then that's going to become something that innately you do.
Yeah.
Whereas if I say I want to talk to Kanu Sankara on a Saturday morning about masculinity and what it means to be a better man, the positive values I know I will get from Kanu Sankara, I know will add positivity to my life and clarity to the direction that I want to go. It's all about the company that you keep in addition to yes, you're correct in the sense that male support is important, but proper seeking out the right counsel and wisdom um, is absolutely critical, I think.
I love how you distill that. Not only must they have support, but positive support. That is critical.
And
You
just to tell you one thing about before I move on to that. So when I was in St. Mary's, I was very much trying to find my way as a young man. And there was a crew of fellas that would break school. And for a period of time, I would break school too.
break
Because,
school is leaving school without authorization during
yeah,
school time.
essentially, you had enough of school and you want to have fun, so you leave school to go to the arcade or
Yeah.
to go home and lime or whatever. And because that was the crew that I was liming with and trying to find myself and my direction, those were the things that I was doing. But see, for me, eventually, I came to the realization that after doing that for a month or two, that this course of action, this way of living, didn't really hold any benefit for me. So again, you perform the objective analysis, and then you start associating yourself with persons who maybe do well academically, and you look at how they approach work, and you look at how they approach their success, and you say, okay, you take copious notes of what they're doing, the way they operate in class. What are the things they're doing? Are they speaking at the back of the class? Are they up front trying to take notes? And you're surrounding yourself with positive people, and you have conversations with them. How you study, boy? How do you do this? How are you balancing everything? And so the people that you surround yourself with, Kanu, is absolutely critical.
Absolutely critical. Like there's this saying that if you associate with five persons who are of a particular mindset, you are going to automatically become the sixth. So
Yeah, for sure. For
that
sure.
is,
Unless you have the power to change that group,
yeah,
that would be some. You have to have that's the exception rather than the rule.
yeah, that's going to take a lot of work. For sure. You have been through a divorce. We don't often hear men speak about divorce. How did that impact you on an emotional level?
I think divorce is first of all is a very difficult thing. I never have been in any relationship with anyone, any woman, with the intention that it should end. I always try to make my relationships work, and of course, marriage being a sacrament, um, if you give it its appropriate spiritual weighting, even if you don't, marriage still holds a particular significance. And it's not something that I would recommend that people easily depart from once you've engaged in it, especially where you have children involved. It's absolutely serious as an obligation. And but you see, I would say, to answer the question directly, departing from marriage for me was something I accepted because of the process that I went through before I was divorced. And I mean legally divorced. I'm not talking about separated and still legally married. I think for me, because of what certain emotions I would have endured, and certain I was forced to accept realities at different stages. And it's not an easy thing. You see, Kanu, here's the fundamental thing about marriage. Human beings within this system are selfish. If you do economics, you'll realize that the capitalist system that we live in is profit driven.
Yeah.
You will find a lot of rich people and a lot of poor people. And the idea is that people get wealth at the expense of others. So this economic the principle of our capitalist economic system is that there are winners and there are losers. You will have those in the upper echelons of society, and you'll have a tremendous amount of persons in the grassroots. Now, it's a very selfish system. Life now is very selfish. We are encouraged to focus on ourselves as opposed to giving to others. So, whereas you had the church or religious organizations playing a great part in society that would teach you things like love for your brethren, love for your fellow man, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Those were very fundamental principles that were meant to encourage human unity and togetherness. In a traditional sense, you'd hear about arranged marriages, persons being, put together to form a union with no prior knowledge of each other, and they would make it work because of commitment and dedication. You have to understand your partner. You have to submit in certain regards, and in certain ways you lead.
Yeah.
But it's all based on the understanding that you work out. But the value of religious organizations like the church that give this ideal um, perception of human unity has diminished tremendously over the past few decades. And now you have what is very much a selfish lifestyle. I mean, people being encouraged to see about themselves, and that's what the economic system promotes. You know, sometimes within job environments, you'll hear people say, "That's not my function. The government not paying me for that. I'm not being compensated for this particular task that I'm being asked to do. That's not in my job description."
Yeah.
It's not. It's not about helping somebody. I could help you, but it's not part of my job description. So
I
this is
wouldn't do it.
just right. This is just to give an example of how we have become a selfish society. So now, in the context of this selfish society, you're putting two people together and asking them to practice values of compromise and compromise and loving someone else and caring enough about someone else's needs. You're asking people to practice these values that are not necessarily being taught and put into mainstream media.
Yeah.
And you're asking them to make a marriage work. The fundamental tenet, a marriage is like a relationship. It's like a friendship that you have with a girl. And you and the girl, you all enjoy each other's company. You all go out to different places. You all have a good time. You all become great friends. You all could confide in each other, and eventually you move into a marital relationship, because you want to take it to the next level. But that's
Right.
really not that's ideally what a marriage should be. Because again, upon my divorce, I had time to think about what a marriage should be, and you think about that, something that forms genuinely, and you develop that rapport and that trust naturally, and that bond and that willingness to be there for each other and to compromise and all these various things. But people now aren't putting in the necessary foundation before marriage. And that is really why we are seeing the failure of marriage in such a way. So I know your original question, Kanu, was what the effect of marriage was on me. But I think in that discussion, we also have to go innately into why marriages are breaking down. And that really is is what's happening. It's a question of people not taking any time to discern and understand others. So before your podcast began, I asked you what was your target audience. I asked you some questions about how should I speak, what manner of English should I use, should I hold back in saying certain things, and this was because I wanted to get an understanding of what I was getting into before we started.
Right.
Not that I would have refused based on anything you said, but I still wanted to understand what I was getting into, and that's just seems fundamental. A lot of people don't appreciate the person that they are getting married to. They're rushing into marriage because, again, people have these unrealistic expectations that social media is placing on you in very many cases of this ideal wedding and this ideal life. And
After the wedding.
life is
Yeah.
not like that, partner. Life is
Very far
nobody's
from.
nobody's telling the youths today that are getting married that look, in-laws, you need to stay away from your in-laws. You need to build your own understanding. You need to be financially stable before, because money can cause issues. You need, if you're having children, you need to have you need to have a support structure in place, because obviously, if your child is not being well taken care of and you have to work a job 9 to 5, your peace of mind is not there, and you're going to snap
Right.
at your other partner. Do people now understand that when I come home from work, I switch off? We could talk to each other. Do people even have that relationship of communication as best friends, or a open flow of communication where they can talk about their problems? Sometimes, your significant other might come and she might be upset, and you
Yeah.
want to know what's going on, where's this coming from, because you're not only you are not privy to the information that has caused her to adopt that particular mental frame. So now you are fighting. Already there you have two persons trying to communicate on different wavelengths. So you
You're
have
gonna
to be
have that clashing.
yeah. Can we to, to be successful in life, you really have to put a lot of thought into what you do in any aspect. And the nature of the world is so chaotic and so fast paced that people don't get the time to do that. They simply don't. And that's why I am very adamant that the way the system is set up now is is geared towards the failure of human relationships.
Hmm.
It's like Fast and Furious. You ever saw Vin Diesel in Fast and Furious? The pace that he has to drive, you make one mistake, it could cause such a catastrophe, because
Yeah.
you don't have the time to really sit down and constructively analyze. And
And
in
that is
anything you
why
do
it's
in
so
life, yeah,
important.
it is critical.
Hmm. Shame. So you're a tutor for adult literacy,
Yeah.
and men, I'm speaking generally here, often have that sense of pride and ego where they may feel ashamed to do something because it may make them appear weak. What has been your experience with men who are in the adult literacy class when it comes to shame?
I think for me, people will so shame is a relative thing, eh? It's a thing that's married to perception. So if you tell me a particular problem that you are having in your life, and I respond, I roll my eyes and I look at you in a puzzling or quizzical manner, you would you're a human being, you're accustomed to dealing with people. You would be a bit apprehensive based on my response to share anything further. You might even feel a sense of shame.
Yeah.
Or let's say you come to me and say, Ravi, I cannot read. Of course, that's not the case. You're a very intellectual guy, but let's look at a hypothetical. Come and say, Ravi, I can't read. And I respond to you, boy, you can't read, boy, what's going on? What's going on with you? Let's say I'm critical of you for that. You're gonna feel a sense of shame. So as an adult literacy tutor, my job is to take people into a very warm environment and let them understand that I am here to help you. I am not here to judge you. Brother, I want you to achieve success. I'm going to help you. So one of the things that I was able to do with at least one of my students was to, Alta is based on a program, but from time to time I would text message him and he would text message me, and he would practice constructing his sentences, because WhatsApp communication is a pretty common form of communication now, but
Mhm.
you want to be sending messages that make sense and follow a decent grammatical structure and grammatical rules. So we send messages to each other, and over time, he's been able to master the art of sending very good WhatsApp messages, well structured, well reasoned, with a positive message.
That's good.
So, but you see, again, that was something I did. That was not a part of the program, but it's something I did with him to give him the opportunity. Because at the end of the day, I see myself as a facilitator. I see myself as there to help. My purpose is not there to is not to judge. And my demeanor within the classroom setting is I'm always trying to make jokes. I'm always trying to put people at ease.
Yes.
Because you also have to remember that right now we're living in the age of spin. There's so many options available to people as to how to allocate their time that you also want to make them feel invited. You want to make them feel like coming here was a good thing. So helping people, making them feel welcome and warm is all part of the package that I would try to. But that's not for just for myself. That, as I suppose, is for all the alter tutors in my unit, because we have about three
Okay.
persons in my particular location. But it really depends on how you deal with people. And it comes back to what I said about being able to give to others and what your mentality is. What are you there for? You know, in the Old Testament, in the New Testament, they say that I think they had asked Jesus, why do you hang out with tax collectors and men who have maybe a known negative image in the community? And he said that he well have no need of a healer. The sick do. I'm not trying to say that the person is not sick, but my point is that you give your help where you need it to persons who need it.
Yeah.
That's the principle I'm trying to get from it.
You're an attorney. You've been in the legal profession for years. How has that impacted your perception on masculinity and manhood? You know, it's not often we hear a lawyer speak outside of the context of law. So I'm interested to hear this.
I think one of the things about being a lawyer is that people tell you things in confidentiality that they might not tell their best friends.
Hmm.
And this way, it can be a little stressful because people are coming to give you their problems and not coming to necessarily give you positive news. Why do I preface my answer with that statement? Because you learn more about human nature in this job than you would necessarily in possibly many other occupations or trades. Masculinity is, I would say that attorneys are a subset of the problems facing attorneys, male attorneys, are the same that faces any other man. And the interesting thing about it is, as much as one might feel that we are different because of our professional orientation, there are really a lot of similarities between men in general, you know. And that's why I preface the answer by saying that I've had access to speaking to people in a very personal capacity for many years. So I understand. And my realization is that all people are basically the same, you know. Whatever divisions we think we want to set to distinguish ourselves from others. I would submit that the same problems you have, given your history in the regimental services, some same problems that I might have. Yeah, we look different, but you mightn't think so on the face of it. But so that's the first thing to understand, that being in legal profession has taught me that we all basically the same and we all basically have the same problems.
Yeah.
Which is why it comes down to the idea that if I need masculine support for my problems, or a male forum to voice my issues to get feedback, I wouldn't necessarily go to people in the legal profession. You are fine to speak to, because we all have common human issues,
Right.
yeah, that we encounter. The particulars or specific particulars might be different, but the general principles and the general guidance and the general understanding will remain the same between us. Now, of course, what I can say, to be a little more specific, is that what you realize with a lot of male prisoners who come before the courts are that they come from backgrounds where single parent homes, alcohol, drug abuse in some cases, and there's no male figure in the household. And what you find is almost at some stage of their life, there's a tendency to rebel against society. And that's a funny thing because society in general hasn't specifically done anything to you. But your perception is that the world has wronged me. I have been placed in a particular situation because the world is against me. People are against me. The police are against me. Sometimes, in the odd occasion, this might have a rational basis. For instance, if the police shot a young man's father, you could understand why in a situation that he might have a resentment towards all police.
Yeah.
But that's the one-off particular scenario. Generally, people develop this sort of resentment that festers, and they lash out at society, members of society who really had no part in that. So it really is, it comes back to a very fundamental principle, which is the things that you put into a person and the things that you are going to get out. Generally speaking, but use an economic terms, ceteris paribus, all other things being equal. What you put in is what you get out. And this is true with anything in life, in my respectful view. We may not be able to get or do much about someone who has a negative socialization at a young age. Because by the time that person comes before the court, they've already offended. But what we can do is, and this is why, again, our prison program, that I am so keen and adamant about it. When you are able to give that learning and wisdom to people, and of course, they can choose up to reject it, but you're giving them exposure to it and you're explaining things to them in a different way. You're trying to put different information and ideas before them for their consideration. Because remember, the age we tend to get offenders at, they are well formed, they're adults, so they're already set in their ways. But you're trying to you're trying to go into their reality in the prison, which is a big thing in itself. You're not asking them to come to you, going to them. You're going into their world that they currently perceive themselves as suffering in, and you are trying to give them ideas and values that they can use to replace the negative socialization that they would have encountered as a child. All this sounds good in theory, but all you can really do at the end of the day is provide the guidance. Yeah. You can't force people to live the way that you want to live. You could give them the guidance, and maybe when they go on the outside, they say, this is it. I remember I did a program in the prison, and I remember Mr. Sankara was talking about this difficulty. And you know what? I'm not going to make this choice. If you give them one nugget of wisdom that could influence them in a positive way in the future, then that's really the minimum that you can hope for. So you see a difference as well. There are persons who are lawyers, and the background and the educational background and the kind of backing they would have gotten as minors propel them to that position. But not everyone is so lucky. And one of the reasons I tend to be very down to earth about these things is because when I was in St. Mary's, I wasn't doing particularly well. And it took meeting someone who took an interest in me and told me I could do it in order to go from failing subjects to where I am now.
Excelling. Wow.
And excelling is a relative concept, brother. so many things, so many aspects of life to say that we have to judge. Maybe falling so short in some, excelling in others, as you put it. But my point is, no one is coming to save you in this life as a man. No one is coming
That's
to
deep.
save you. it's just very deep. I didn't get it as much as I take credit for it. It's something it's a statement I got from listening to David Coggins, who's one of the most intense persons I've ever come across on social media. Um, and he's a YouTuber. He has his videos on YouTube with the motivation and his teachings are there for all to see. So no one
Who's
is
gonna
coming to
carry the
save.
boats?
Yeah, no one is coming to save you, and that's frightening. So when you get so, I think you have a responsibility if you want to make the world a better place to go out there and to try to help other people, because you can't. If you get robbed, or somebody robs you, or somebody does you something wrong, you just want to say, "Well, the world is a bad place. What's going on with society?" That's that's not going to help. What's going to help is if you actually try to do something about it. And yes, we can't be, you can't reach everyone, but you can reach some people. And sometimes information and knowledge tend to have a ripple effect.
Yeah.
Someone may share your message or share your knowledge, and so at the end of the day, you get a benefit. But that's one of the things men need to understand, and people in general need to understand. No one owes you anything. Your parents make you're brought into this world. It's a biological function that's been happening for years. People have sexual intercourse and reproduce, and at the end of the day, you have to make it on your own. And if you don't understand that, you know you're gonna be in a lot of trouble, because you can have an unrealistic expectation that people owe you something, and you go through life expecting things from people, and that's not how it operates. You're living life on a false premise. And that's another thing. One of the most important things I'll say in this podcast, as far as I'm concerned, is people have unrealistic expectations. People get into relationships and people get into situations dealing with other people, and they have unrealistic expectations because you have taken time to. There are two aspects of a situation: what a situation actually is, and what your expectations of the situation are. If you're hoping for a Disney movie outcome where you fall in love with a woman and you dance together into the sunset,
Happily ever
that
after.
that's the most unrealistic expectation that you could ever have, my friend. So if you are aware that life is a grind and that we're gonna have to work hard, there are gonna times you're gonna get upset, you're gonna be frustrated, but look, you can't lash out at me, you can't bring your problems. So we have to have an understanding. Right? Because this house, we have a rule in this house: no arguments. No arguments in this house. Nobody goes to sleep vexed in this house. Now, it's not just dependent on you, it's dependent on your partner accepting and understanding and applying the rules. But that's the situation.
Mentorship. You mentioned mentorship. Tell me a bit more about this prison program
Yeah.
for the audience who doesn't know about the prison program.
A prison program was born in, like I said, post divorce, when I had during COVID-19, when I had a lot of space with my thoughts. The prison program was born in that I wanted to go back to my roots of doing things that could help others.
You're
But
primarily working with men here.
yeah, but
Yeah.
right. But this is how it is. So you would have known that I joined Toastmasters at a particular point in time, and that's where I met persons like yourself. You were involved in the youth leadership program, and your clubmate at the time was Hussein. And I like the idea that Toastmasters could do that kind of work with children. That was a beautiful program. I enjoyed working with the young kids, helping them craft speeches. And, at that age, that age of youth, the world is before you.
Yeah.
The sky is the limit. And to hear their stories and their realities was a really humbling experience for me, and it's something I was really grateful for. And I know that it's something that you particularly enjoyed as well.
Thoroughly.
Yes. So I have been involved in the criminal justice system for some times, and I thought, you know what, Kanu Sankara is a major in the defense force, and Marlon Perejo, another one of my Toastmasters. Marlon's a lot more talkative than I, believe it or not. Well, you know that. So I'm much more enthusiastic about projects at the time. And so meeting you guys was a breath of fresh air. And I thought, we have a group here with a particular background in law enforcement that I think could make a special difference in our program, because you have inmates who have. And what I liked about you and Marlon particularly is that you guys are very down to earth, in the sense that yes, you hold good positions, solid positions, and within the protective services. But yet, I think that you guys remember that you are human beings and that you came from somewhere. Marlon is, for persons who may not know, he's blind. He suffers from that disability. So
Oh, they are going to see him on this podcast.
yeah, yeah. You told me you were working on something with him yesterday. So
Yeah.
the thing is, you are able to provide a perspective to these gentlemen from the side of law enforcement. So you're considered delinquent, that you have offended, yes, but I want you to understand the side of law enforcement from the perspective of persons like Kanu and Marlon, who also understand your side of the equation. So what you're getting in a situation like that with this particular cast, Kanu and Marlon, are not persons who are coming to lecture or speak to the prison population in a manner that's almost like a schoolmaster telling you what you're doing wrong. You're getting Kanu and Marlon who can come into the system and say, I understand you. Look, we are similar because at the end of the day, we're all human beings. And I remember there was a gentleman who you knew from your community in the first iteration of the program.
We
And
grew up together.
I will never forget how you reacted when you met him there, and how you said to me at the time, Ravi, look how different life choices could get us in different places from the same community. So so that's it. I had a group of persons who I found a group of persons who I thought were very down to earth and could reach the prison population and the common man, and then give them that perspective. So when you are coming at me, when Kanu and Marlon are speaking to me as the prisoner in a way that I can understand, and not a condescending manner, I'm more likely to receive their message. And of course, they are also getting the benefit of understanding how life operates from the perspective of law enforcement, because I may just see the world, because of my socialization as a child, I may just see the world in terms of the world is oppressing me. The world owes me something. But then you have Kanu and Marlon coming to give you the perspective that, look, no, it's not really that. These are just the systems and procedures by which everyone must abide. So that in its most fundamental, the cast was the most critical thing. I wasn't going to just take any and everybody into the prisons. It had to be people who were genuine and passionate. And then you and Marlon, that's definitely what we got. But the program itself was designed to apply Toastmaster skills of public speaking, to prepare the prisoners to be able to use their experiences within the prisons, and also the experiences which would have led them to a life of crime, in order to provide a mentorship message to persons uh, on the outside. So, for instance, the idea was that they would go to schools or they would go to different institutions and talk to persons who were maybe high risk of offending, and let them understand that, look, as attractive as prison might sound to the untrained or the inexperienced individual, this is in fact the reality that you face. Is not a nice place. Also, look, I lived a particular life, and this is where it ended. This is where I ended up. And so they are able to say, if I can see that I'm living a similar life to this prisoner who's trying to deter me, and maybe I need to stop or check myself because I could end up in a similar place. And look, he's told me how bad it is. I definitely don't want to end up there. So, but that's just the Toastmaster aspect of the program. The educational or academic portion of the program. The program was able to achieve so much more in my respectful view, Kano, because what we were able to get was a sharing between the prisoners. They were able to share their life experiences. And in jail, you don't necessarily speak about your personal business because your personal information can be used as leverage by other inmates.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is the perception there. So you found that persons were more inclined to share their experiences and come to terms with the reasons for their incarceration. Because sometimes we live in denial for the things that we do. And some people are unable to from the time of the incident to their deathbed, unable to accept responsibility for a particular situation. Yeah. So that element of sharing, that therapeutic element, is also something and was an unintended consequence of the program. Um, what we also encountered inmates who couldn't read, um, and it was a bit challenging getting them to achieve the objective. But I mean, that's why we use smaller breakout groups to provide more individualized attention.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the inspirations behind me doing Alta as well. I wanted to know that if I went back into the prisons a second time, I could help people. I'd have the skills to help people um, to meet their targets. The persons that we dealt with in 2023 were lifers, persons who had been sentenced to imprisonment for the remainder of their life. A lot of those persons have since been resentenced, but the rehabilitative program that you give to them hopefully will help them mentor other persons on the outside. It also help them communicate in a way that persons can understand. Because sometimes people have an idea in their mind and they're not able to communicate it properly. And the manner in which it's communicated doesn't necessarily lead to the best result in terms of the other person getting the message. So that's essentially what the program sought to accomplish. Um, and I think we want the idea is to do the program again this year. The new commissioner of prisons, we have a new commissioner of prisons, Mr. Carlos Carraspe, who I know is very enthusiastic about the program. So we'll see what happens and what additions and alterations we can make. The idea is to make some positive additions to the program. Certainly, we spoke a lot of the topics that we spoke about with manhood. I know you had recommended when I sent you the course outline that we include something on manhood, and that was a deeper idea based on the initial thought I had of dealing with conflict resolution, teaching persons how to avoid tension escalating to a point where it results in violence and offending.
Yeah.
And members of society who hear this might say, "What you're doing work with people in the prisons for?" But I think there tends to be a castigating perception by some members of society that persons who do crime should be shut away for the rest of their life. But maybe what they don't appreciate because of their socialization and their distance away from the grassroots is that sometimes people
People
are
change.
destined. People could change, and some people become a product of what they're given.
Yeah.
You can't assume everybody has the strength to rise out of the circumstances or the ability to rise out of the circumstances that they are born in. There's a young fella I remember I represented in family court. His father was shot and killed by the police. He grew up around gangsters in Duncan Street, and his mother was never there. What was he going to become? What was he going to become? And
I
what are
get
you going to tell me? We shouldn't help him?
I get
Absolute madness.
exactly. And I guess it ties back to the conversation that we had, that the people who you associate with, you eventually become like them.
Yeah.
And if that's the environment that he's in, it's only obvious that he had no guidance and there wasn't any other persons around him to point him in a particular direction. Maybe not. And that's why he ended up where he ended up.
I don't think maybe at all. I think if you're, because it's like we spoke earlier, you have this perception that the police have shot your father. Society is against me. The police is part of the government against me.
Yeah.
You see, it's easy for people to make these linkages, and then after you have persons around you who persons around you who are involved in gangs have an aversion towards the police. So they're feeding you the information that the police have. It's almost as though we playing cops and robbers, and I always want to be a robber
Hmm.
because the other alternative is it don't make sense. It's not making sense to me to live a good life because I'll be part of their system.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I remember there was we were trying to get him a fine because he was a young fella, and I was asking his mother before the court, how could can you get us, can you pay a fine? Because it was last year our phone, I think the charge was, and the mother was like, no, I can't pay that fine. But yet, in the services report, you see that the mother parties every week.
Oh,
So there are a lot of deep rooted issues within our society that I think we as a society need to be more cognizant of what's going on at the lower levels, at the grassroots levels, because we could be a little too judgmental as a society sometimes. You hear the court of public opinion in Trinidad is will always find somebody guilty because we are the worst critics of other persons sometimes without understanding the full facts of a person's reality before making that judgment. And that's really the point of the prisons program. That's the point of the prisons program, to try and help a system that is designed for people to fail. Not just human relationships, but designed for people, a lot of people to fail.
I must say that that prison program had an immense impact on me and my perception on prisoners, on the prison system, and how I view persons who become involved in a life of crime. So I think this is a program that I am certainly going to continue committing to because
Um,
it can help a lot of young men who happen to get caught up in that system,
mhm.
and they are just revolving and unable to escape it.
So,
That's
so,
important.
so, Kanu, just to make an important point there, you can have a father figure. You can have an absence of a father figure. You can have father difficulties with the father figure in a home in two ways. One, he can be totally absent, or he can be a weak father figure or delinquent father figure.
Yeah,
And one of the things I like to do is go behind the story of people to find out where they come from. Because I think that, not because I fast, I like tobacco, but I like to understand people. That's something I enjoy doing, to really understand who a person is.
yeah.
And even within when we were doing the YLP program, there were some kids who will tell you that they don't see their father
And
if he's not
YLP's
around.
youth leadership program.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right. Yes, yes. So I mean, don't and those people may not necessarily end up in a life of crime, but they may end up with their own issues.
yeah,
You know what I mean? So at the end of the day, I know that we speak about father figures in the context of the criminal justice system and the prison program, but the issue of fathers not being present and not having a sufficient rule or weak rule in the lives of their children is also another bigger issue that could cause problems on different levels. The problem may not end up in the criminal justice system, but it may manifest itself in society in other ways,
yeah.
in failing marriages and escalating divorce rates because people not understanding, or men don't understand how to deal with pressure and stress. Or maybe they grew up in a single parent home where they see the mother dealing with the stress and they're not equipped, they're not seeing that empirical example of a man dealing with the situation. And that might sound a bit sexist, but there are some things, some qualities and values that men have, that men can impart as fathers, that a woman would not necessarily be able to impart even if she fulfills the fatherhood. I
Yeah.
think it's biological, and it's very much a question of the traditional rules of the sexes. So, for instance, a father getting involved in teaching you football, cricket, those kinds of things, getting you involved in physical activities and sports, might devalue, of course, a female, a mother who performs the father figure role can do that as well, but maybe not to the same level that the father would be able to.
To have that impact on his
Yeah.
son. Yeah. And I guess it's likewise, it's the same thing. And you would experience it as well, being a father to your daughter. There would be limitations in what you can impart to her because
Yeah.
she is growing into becoming a young lady.
Yeah, and I mean, but again, where there's a will, there's a way. For instance, in terms of things like hygiene, when you play sports as a young lady, you finish play, you'll have a body odor. but you'll be in the club around fellas or other persons. What can you do to improve your body odor, your hygiene in a situation like that, working with different jerseys, maybe having a deodorant, things that sound simple, and other aspects of feminine hygiene as well.
Yeah.
Because remember, you your wife may not have, or your girlfriend may not have the experience of having played sports, so dealing with hygiene in that particular context might not be something they are aware of. They may take for granted. But you, having grown up in a club, yourself, I played table tennis in Woodbrook Gladiators many years ago. I know of the problems that people could face. So I would speak to girls in the club and ask, how do you deal with these issues? So even though the issues might be traditionally feminine issues, you as a father still can play some role in finding out, or at least imparting the information to your significant other, or the mother of the child, because it's like I say, it's a partnership, as it should, in theory, be a partnership where people share knowledge and data and information to improve the overall structure of the family, the overall outcome of the family.
Yes.
So I try to take an active impact in many areas. I mean, of my daughter's life, even if they're not traditional areas. Of course, sometimes some of them might say, "Boy, you don't know what you're talking about," and it might be true in some cases. But you can make the effort, and
Yeah.
sometimes making the effort is very important as well. Again, kind of, it really comes down to what you sow is what you will reap. If you go to the gym, if you work 9 to 5, and then you have to take your daughter to practice, and you know you need to lose weight, then you need to go in that gym sometimes 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning and pump. And you need to get up and make that Savannah 3:45, try and make that 2 laps, and try and make sure you run and you get that heart rate up, because it's just what you have to do to succeed.
Yeah.
You had to have a plan, brother, and that's the thing about it that people don't understand. And I didn't understand it for a long time. I don't want to sound like I'm the Dalai Lama or the guru of all plants. Like I'm speaking down to people. That's not it at all. It took me a lot of realization in my life and a lot of analysis to come to that conclusion. So, for instance, I might see a real nice, pretty girl now, and most back in my 20s, I mean, I need to go and talk to this girl and make friends. I'm a little different now in life. I'm more about objectives, ambition, financial,
Yeah.
improving your financial position. Maybe I need to invest in that. Maybe I could invest in a stock. So what are a stock? What is the opportunity available to me? I read more about the economy, what's going on, where are we likely to be in 6 months with the situation in the United States and tariffs, the stock market crashing across there. What was likely to happen to Trinidad? What's the trickle down effect likely to be to Trinidad? Can I afford to have debts now? Can I afford to be looking to pay interest? Or is this a time when I ought to be saving my money a little more than usual and cut back on expenses? Life becomes a lot more, with experience. You see life in a more holistic way, and you're able to do a lot of better planning, and you get the art of understanding that things that you may have thought were important at 20 or even 30 are not really that important. And what's most important is having a plan, saving and investing, maybe um, putting away for your daughter's education, these different things. You have to be very methodical and planned out about what you're doing. You can't afford to approach life with the youthful naivety of the 20s.
I totally agree. If you had a message to deliver to young men or men in general, what would that message be?
I would think have okay, there's just something I want to say here that I just need to say, because I think it's really important. So there's a book that was written by a great Japanese samurai called Miyamoto Musashi. The book is called the Tokoro, or the path of walking alone. And in this book, the there are a number of principles of life that he enunciates. Yeah, and of course, Miyamoto Musashi was a samurai who dedicated himself to perfection. I think he won a record number of duels in Japan. And this was a
Right.
time when one mistake you could lose your life. And he was talking about not being influenced by emotions, not uh, not being partial to a particular feeling, So I think it's about, in that, what he was trying to say was to be reasoned, be methodical, and have a plan. Do not allow your do not allow yourself to be overawed by the emotions of the moment. And it goes back in hand with having a plan and being structured in what you are doing and having a clear roadmap as to how to get there.
I like that. I like that. Ravi Raja, this was a very informative conversation, and there were quite a bit of nuggets of knowledge that you drop here, some gems. And I look forward to reviewing this. And for the person, the young man, the man who is listening or looking on at this interview, I know that you are going to find value in this. So I thank you for being on the podcast.
Yeah.
Manhood
Thank you,
speaks.
Kanu. Thank you, Kanu. It's always a pleasure to have these conversations with you, and I'm definitely happy to see that you're going from strength to strength. I look forward to working with you again on this program that we have coming up.
I just want to say thank you for checking out the entire episode. Manhood Speaks is a space where regular men like you get to share their experiences so that they can inspire other men. If you wish to be a guest on this show, just send me an email at manhoodspeakspodcast@gmail.com. And I want to ask you to consider subscribing. When you subscribe, you are not just simply subscribing to another YouTube channel. You are becoming a part of a revolution. You are joining a community of brothers, men who are redefining what it means to be a man in modern society today. So subscribe, and I will see you in the next interview.